When we're young, we move with freedom and confidence, with a great resilience to injury. But somewhere along the line, we develop poor habits and become more vulnerable to back pain. Back Pain Solutions features evidence-based and practical advice to help you take back control of your health and get back to the activities you love. This is your guide to better back health through movement. So join us as we demystify some of the commonly held beliefs about back pain and build your confidence to a stronger back the smart way.
Welcome to the Back Pain Solutions podcast. It's Jacob, and today I'm interviewing a very favorite chiropractor of mine, Dr. David Seaman. He was the first person to author a scientific paper that specifically hypothesized that diets can be pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. He's a doctor of chiropractic, and he has a Master of Science in Bionutrition from the University of Bridgeport, which he finished in 1991. So while in clinical practice in the late 1980s, he became aware of the developing research that linked nutrition to the inflammatory process and noticed that appropriate dietary changes could significantly improve various musculoskeletal and visceral conditions. Welcome, Dr. Seaman, to the show. I first heard of you when I was a chiropractic student myself back in 2007. And it was with a chiropractic friend who was already a chiropractor who he was into your stuff then, and he introduced you to me, basically. I was already a big fan of good nutrition, and I knew the value of it. And I was, even the other students at college used to think I was crazy because I organized these evenings with videos of, raw food as healing diabetes and did all these sort of, before I really knew anything. I knew that there was something to this. It didn't make any sense. Just to leave it out. And so I was always into it, and I had a lot of sources, but I could never really put my hands on it. And so I've been watching a lot of your YouTube explanation videos, and I get a lot from it. It's great. I can watch it all day. And I read your article about Corona, and that was very interesting, about how you don't have to be obese to have the physiology of someone who is obese, and then that can lead to a cytokine storm, and how that can be a bad path for you if you're not healthy. And so it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Can you please tell me a little bit about yourself? What do you do at the moment? Do you treat? Do you only do nutritional consultations?
Well, I used to travel to a lot of conventions and do postgrad stuff and go to different chiropractic colleges in the States. And I was supposed to go to the Anglo-European school, I think, in 2020. And we tried again for 2021, but of course that got canceled. And so I don't travel really much anymore. I used to travel like 30 to 40 weekends a year. And then past year, 2020, and then this year, minimal traveling just because of the restrictions. So I do a lot of stuff online. I work for a nutrition company where I used to do lectures for them and write for them and help design supplements. And then I do some online courses for Logan College of Chiropractic. Currently, I teach 2 of their online nutrition classes.
Okay.
I'm located in Florida, which is why I'm tan. Well, I guess you can see I'm tan because I'm in Florida. So yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
It's been nice here. It's always nice here. So and then I teach 2 neuroscience courses for Parker in Texas.
Okay.
And then I write books. And then I do those videos. So I stay pretty busy.
Sounds like it. So you're quite busy in the educational aspect.
Yeah, education.
Yeah. Do you also see patients?
I don't now. I do some consultations, but no, not so much. Yeah. It kind of, so the problem with like seeing patients and trying to figure stuff out, like for me, when I did that video on how COVID can cause anosmia, it took me a day to like go through the literature, and that's difficult to do if you're practicing and seeing patients. There's too many discordant, you're distracted all over the place, and so let's say you're practicing, you got and you have a couple of kids, and you got a family to take care of, and you got billing to deal with, and all the other stuff, running an office. Who has time to sit down and read stuff? Yep. It's very difficult. You have to be a special person to do both. Yep. And I'm not that special. I can only do one.
I can understand that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. But I think that a lot of people are getting treated by you through others.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's how you got to look at it. And oh, fantastic. So I think a big question for me is, how would you, because I'm sure you have experience with this, how would you approach a patient who is sitting in front of you and has chronic low back pain, and you want to try and get it through to them that they, we're going to treat them manually, we may do some exercises, but there's a lot of value to their possibility of getting better by looking at their diet. How do you approach that?
Well, it always depends upon the patient and their background and their interests. Like, so the whole evidence, what's the right word? It's not, it's I guess they call it, evidence-based practice, I guess, where you
Yeah.
take the patient perspective. I forget I get,
The
what is that?
the
It's
social.
the three circles. Yeah. It's not it's not
Okay.
biopsychosocial. It's the evidence-based model where you got the
Oh, yeah.
research, experience, patient preferences,
Yeah.
right? So this is a patient preference thing. You have to figure out who the patient is sitting in front of you. So if you have a neuroscientist in front of you, I would have a different conversation than if I had a plumber in front
Yeah.
of me. So I would use different language depending upon it. But let's just say you just have the average layperson. And so the easiest way, I think, is most people who have back pain, unless it's really horrific, ridiculous pain, they'll get some relief when they take anti-inflammatory drugs to some degree.
Yeah.
It may not get rid of it, but almost everybody will have tried NSAIDs, right? Aspirin or NSAIDs.
Yeah.
And so the first question should be, did you get some relief? And in most cases, people will say yes, but the relief didn't last, right? I mean, that's a very common experience.
Okay.
And so would you agree? Or they take Tylenol and they get some relief, but it doesn't go away, so they wanted to come in to see the chiropractor. Would you agree that that's pretty common?
Absolutely, because most of the time a GP probably prescribes as well, and doesn't work.
Right, exactly. So the easiest way, I think, the easiest doorway into getting someone cued into thinking about their health and their diet would be, well, the anti-inflammatory drugs, what they do is they block pathways that are created by eating too many pro-inflammatory calories.
Uh-huh.
So if you eat inflammation, you have to take anti-inflammatory drugs. When the drug wears off, the inflammation will be there because you keep eating. Because the average American, and it's different, the Europeans are getting fatter and sicker than they were years ago.
True.
Yeah. So certainly less. Like, for example, when I was looking at the death tolls for COVID, comparing the US to Sweden, because that was the most published that I could find, Sweden to Japan. So the death rate in Japan from COVID, I mean, they've only had, over the last year and a half, maybe 3,000 deaths in total from COVID.
Wow.
3,000.
Wow.
I mean, it's about that. So 3,000.
Okay.
So in America, I think it's 300,000.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? Well, the Japanese population, only 1.6% is obese.
Yeah.
The American population, 42% are obese.
Yeah.
The Swedish population, 20% are obese.
Yes.
So if you look at obesity, you look at death per capita, then you see that if the fatter you are, the more problematic it is.
Yeah.
So that's another way to look at it. So the obesity issue drives inflammation. Yeah. And most people now, of course, you could be at a normal weight, metabolically obese person, which would be someone who doesn't exercise and is skinny fat, is the way we used to talk about it when, right? So I remember years ago, I saw this MRI, or a CT of the thighs of people who weighed the same, and one guy was shredded and packed all this muscle, and the other person was kind of skinny fat or almost fat, and there's just all this adipose tissue.
Yeah.
So people don't really realize, and this whole thing now, particularly in America, I don't know if it's in Europe, where it's called the fat acceptance movement.
So I've seen it in America. I've seen some interesting stuff.
I think Europeans have a little bit more physical health self-respect than Americans do.
Yes.
I mean, Americans just can't stop eating, and they think it's like a great party.
Yes.
So
I want to justify it.
So, So in Europe, it'll probably be easier than in America because I did a lot of videos on obesity and all that other stuff, and people say, "Oh, be careful, you don't fat shame." I'm like, what are you talking about? This is a health issue.
Yep.
So we eat the calories that then create the inflammation. So then the drugs are going to inhibit that short term, and they'll get some relief. And so the idea is to tell a patient, well, the idea is to change your body chemistry by changing the foods that you eat, so you don't need medication, and that you will heal, and that my manual care will be much more effective for you.
Correct.
And I wouldn't bring this up. In the first few treatments, because when people come to see a chiropractor, they expect back cracking, muscle work, bending, twisting, and exercises. They don't say, "Hey, no more French fries."
Yep.
That is a discoordinate kind of state for the patient to deal with.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of drop the bomb on them if they don't respond.
Yeah.
And what I would do too, just real quick,
Sure.
as part of the initial examination, is you want to always do waist hip ratio.
Okay.
And body mass index.
Okay.
And then I will say, well, what do you measure my waist for? Well, it's because it's important because waist hip ratio correlates perfectly with one's inflammatory. Well, not perfectly, but very robust. Correlates with the patient's inflammatory state.
That's a great insight.
Yeah. So it's part of the physical exam: blood pressure, weight, body mass index, waist hip ratio, and get those initially. And they should be, if they're elevated, the patient says, well, I'm trying to lose weight. Will this impact my response? The patient may ask you. And so you say, well, I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. So it's not stressful on people, because again, they're expecting you to crack their back and cure them. They're not expected for you to crack their back, it not work, and then say, okay, no more French fries. Right. So you got to ease into it.
Yeah. I learned that the hard way with some of my patients.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did too. And then that was before I realized that there were objective markers that I could use.
Yes.
And then now that I know that, well, I've known it for a while now, and I've used it at the schools that I've taught at, and the postgrad stuff, it's much easier. Yeah. And it's really not complicated. You don't need to be, you don't need to know what a cytokine storm is or be able to name cytokines to be able to do a waist hip ratio on somebody. Yeah. And everybody knows if you want to be healthy, you eat less crap. It's not that complicated, right?
Yeah, and it's like you say, you want to try and bring the message across without making it stressful, because a lot of people who are trying to lose weight have been busy with it, and they may have failed, and they've just come to you to relieve that specific pain, and then you have to be very delicate in the way you bring it over. But I've stepped into that trap a few times, and I've been, too much to the point, because what I see sometimes, I see the limited potential to heal because somebody is chronically fatigued or something.
Yeah, and chronically fatigued means chronically inflamed, and so that's the problem. And so the first objection that I was presented with years ago with this whole thing, when I was talking about the whole inflammation thing, I would always get the question, well, isn't inflammation the healing process? Well, yeah, as long as it resolves. Yeah. If the inflammation doesn't resolve, now you have chronic disease manifesting. Yeah. And so, of course, after an injury, you're going to be flamed up, but your body should have the wherewithal to turn off the flame and heal the tissues. Now, the problem is that when people become obese and hyperglycemic, or not obese, but not physically active and living on too many refined food calories, they become chronically inflamed. And so they're the ones that need to make the shift. And it takes place over time, for example, and it's actually interesting, as we age, disc pathology, tendon pathology, and joint pathology correlates to cardiovascular pathology.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, tendinopathy, osteoarthritis, disc herniation are essentially manifestations of heart disease in musculoskeletal tissues. Now, that's if one can conceptualize that as the chiropractor, then it becomes a different way of looking at it, because we were all taught, and physical therapists have all been taught, that these musculoskeletal tissues, they're mechanical tissues. Yeah. But that doesn't make any sense, because our mechanical tissues are made of body chemistry. Yeah. So you can't separate mechanics from chemistry. Yeah. And that is the failing, in my experience, of all chiropractic colleges currently. I mean, they may talk about it, but it's not like in their head. It's not in the DC's head or the PT's head. Because I've talked to a lot of PTs too, and they're like, I never really thought of it like that. It's really simple. I mean, you just look at type 2 diabetic patients compared to normal age and weight and all matched controls. Not weight, but just compared to the normal aged people of the same age, but just not diabetic. Yeah. Diabetics will have reduced motion across all joints tested compared to normals. Okay. The diabetics are far more likely to have osteoarthritis, tendinopathy, and disc degeneration and disc herniation. So it correlates. Hyperglycemia, atherosclerosis, heart disease correlates with progressive joint, muscle, bone, tendon, disc dysfunction.
Very interesting. And with like diabetes, I think if I try to put it in the right way, you have actually got an inflamed cell, and that's going to be for the whole body.
Yes.
And so if you bring the inflammation down of that on cellular level, you're going to influence not only the organs and the cardiovascular system, but also the joints and the soft tissues and
everything. Yeah. Because when you look at, say, there are even some papers that are very interesting. They say basically if you have type 2 diabetes, you're going to have tendinopathy somewhere. It just may not be symptomatic.
Yeah.
So here's another way to look at it. So you have someone who's, and many people are obese who don't even know that they're obese. That's the thing, because they think, well, obese is when you are so massive you can't move, but that's not the case.
Are you talking specifically about pre-diabetic as well, or already?
Well, most people who are obese are close to pre-diabetic.
Okay.
Unless they've got really good genes, because some people can handle the body fat accumulation and not go pro-inflammatory for a much longer period of time. So you can have two obese people, same age. One can be hyperglycemic, hypertense, diabetic, and the other person has none of these, no problems at all. So they're like metabolically fit but obese.
Okay, interesting.
And so it's not just big and fat, you're sick. So those would be the obese patients, the overweight patients who respond to your care.
Yeah.
Because they're not inflamed. So their inflammation envelope of tolerance has not been breached. You do your manual care and they feel, that amazed me. When I was in chiropractic college, I used to shadow a DC in practice who I'm still friends with from over 30 years now. And I was amazed. So he had this obese woman come in. I mean, this was a big woman, and she laid face down on the activator table, and she almost filled the whole table wide.
Okay.
And so when he did the gun, the click, 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 he's clicking through 3 or 4 inches of fat. And I'm like, there's no way. In my mind, I'm like, there's no way this is going to help.
Yeah.
So she gets up, she goes, God, no more pain. I love coming to you. Oh my God, it's amazing. Now I was only like 25 then, I guess. And I saw them like, So some big fat people respond great. Some don't. Most leaner, healthy people, they tend to respond great. Some don't. What is the unifying factor among the non-responders? And that was something that jumped into my head when I was 25 years old in chiropractic college. Now it's 35 years later.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting how that works. So the obesity issue does not mean you'll have a non-responder. It means that you might.
Okay. Very interesting, because I thought they go up together. The more overweight you are, the more inflamed you'll be, but not.
Oh, absolutely. Generally, that is very true. Yeah. But there are the outliers who can be physically, obese in terms of measurements, but biochemically fit.
Yeah. No, well put.
But they're going to fall apart sooner or later. It's just that it's taking a little bit longer compared to younger people, or compared to other people the same age or younger or older who have been flamed up for a long time.
What, if I may ask, what would be your way to go in advice for somebody who has not, or at least have a chronic low back issue, and metabolically that they're not doing very well? Where would you probe first?
Well, you have to get measurements, right? And so as you know, the human mind is very much functions very well if your frontal lobe forces the rest of your body. You have this talk with yourself. Okay, so I did my waist hip ratio. I am 1.2 and I should be below 0.95 for a guy. Okay, so my goal is to get to be below 0.95. So you make the numbers the goal, and that way it's a game for the brain. It's also a game for the limbic system. So you have this goal. Uh-huh. So you first have to have a goal. Without a goal, there's no hope. So you have to have a goal.
Yeah, direction.
So the goal. Yeah, absolutely. So human mind loves goals. So as long as they're attainable and understood, and you're committed to it, which is very simple. You can do waist hip ratio, BMI, and you got to get normal. So you say, okay, well, how do I do this? Well, the main thing, actually, do you follow golf at all?
No, played a little bit in the past, but
okay.
No, other sport.
So in America, we just had the PGA Championship, and Phil Mickelson won it. So any of your golfing listeners will know who Phil Mickelson. Do you know who Phil Mickelson is? Ever hear
I've
of
heard
him?
of his name, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's all right. So Phil Mickelson became obese, famous, great player, won many famous tournaments. He became obese. He developed psoriatic arthritis.
Okay.
And he was actually doing Enbrel commercials, which is the TNF receptor antagonist,
Okay.
which is commonly used for autoimmune disease. And so the guy was enormous. I mean, he was this lean model-looking guy when he was in college and first in the pros, and he gained like 50, 60 pounds of fat. So someone got to him, and I don't know who it is, but someone got to him and said, listen, dude, you got to get rid of that body fat. So he does it. And as a 51-year-old, he's almost 51, he won the PGA championship playing against 25-year-olds. So in the interview, they talk about like the sacrifice after he won, the sacrifice it takes to become, to achieve a goal like this. And so they asked him like, so Phil, what'd you have to give up? What'd you do? He goes, well, I had to give up food. Yeah. So what was he eating? He wasn't eating a lot of vegetables and fish, right? And healthy meat, fish, chicken, right? He was eating all kinds of crap. So he had to give that up.
Yeah.
So he had a goal to get rid of his psoriatic arthritis, to become fit and lean and strong and hit the ball as far as 25-year-olds. So he had a goal.
Yeah.
So you have to take not only the waist measurement goals, you have to take the life goals.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, what is the patient's preference? Do they want to be a vegan? Do they want to be an omnivore, or this new thing, the carnivore diet?
Yeah.
Most people are omnivores.
Yeah.
So this means that they've got to, and no matter which one you choose, you want to get rid of refined sugar, flour, and oils. And it's best to make it a goal to be completely free of those calories for a month.
Yeah.
And then replace those calories with vegetation in most cases.
Okay.
And that is very easy for people to do because everybody already knows I should be eating more. Like vegetables typically are eaten all year round, but in the summer, fruits kind of become more popular. People are like, oh, can I have fruit because I've got blood sugar problems? Well, you need to then measure your blood sugar if you have a diabetic problem. And maybe some fruits should be not consumed. But most people can consume fruit as long as they reduce their calories so they start to burn off the excess body fat. And when you're in that reduced calorie state, you're also creating an environment where mitochondria and skeletal muscle can go through their biogenesis process. And then, because what happens when you become diabetic is that muscle cells lose their density of mitochondria. You can see electron micrographs.
Interesting.
I did a couple of those videos. Yeah, where you literally see this abundance of mitochondria in a lean, healthy person, and literally like no mitochondria in the type 2 diabetic person, which can be reversed as long as you reverse the dietary pathology.
May I ask why 1 month of removing the refined sugars, flour and oil?
Well, you can't say forever. That freaks out the food possessed mind.
Right.
So you have to chunk it for most people.
Right.
And then what you do is say, okay, so once you get all your markers normal and you are now a normal physiologic person, you can eat those foods again if you choose to. They don't help you. But if you want to get a taste once in a while, you just got to make sure that your waist-to ratio and BMI stays normal.
Right. And then you also hope that once somebody has felt what it feels like being healthy again, that would be acting as a motivation to stay that way.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've experienced with I don't know, I guess, well, certain chiropractors who are sort of possessed by, if you don't do adjustments all the time, then you're not really a chiropractor. They think that what I'm saying is, actually people say this. So what you're saying is people don't have to come to me anymore. All they got to do is eat salad. I'm like, no, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
What I said was you've got a non-responder in front of you or a potential non-responder in front of you. And if you want to be a responder to manual care, you have to get the biochemistry into an inflammatory state that is not pro-inflammatory. And so that I think is a good mindset for DCs to think about. And in most cases, what you'll have patients who respond. So it'll be like a responding party in your office, like all these people who are physically active or sitting down when they're working and they get little aches and pains here and they want to go do some athletic, whatever you guys are doing during your seasonal years. And they're in aches and pains. They come in and they leave without pain.
Yeah.
And that's much more fun than dealing with these obese, smoking people who are blaming everybody. They're depressed. Oh, by the way, as one's body mass index and hyperglycemia and inflammation status goes up, so does depression.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, so they all
there's a lot of links between a lot of these things, and
yeah, absolutely. The unifying thing is this pro-inflammatory state, which is not complicated to deal with. If you don't want to learn any biochemistry at all, just make sure people's waist-up ratios are proper. So if one's waist-up ratio is proper, their BMI is proper, correlates with the waist-up ratio, and their blood pressure is normal, the chance of them being inflamed is pretty minimal, unless they're not sleeping, because sleep deprivation, chronic stress can all create the flame that will create a non-responder also.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's a study that was done a few years back, maybe 10, 15 years ago, where they looked at C-reactive protein, which is a great inflammatory protein measurement.
Yeah.
And they found that when people were deprived of sleep down to like 4 hours a night, within 10, 15 days, they had CRP levels that were similar to people who had cardiovascular disease.
Wow. Okay.
Just by reducing sleep for 10 days.
Wow.
So think about this. When you were in chiropractic college, when I was, or even undergrad, the end of final exam week, you felt horrible usually. You're up late, right? Not moving.
Aches and pains
it was
everywhere.
horrible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So right there, that shows you these healthy, robust people can feel like old sick people in 1 week during final exams. You can even be eating well, just not sleeping and stressing and not exercising for a week can make you feel sick.
Yeah, I have a little one now, so I know what that feels like, and we're quite, myself and my wife, we're quite, we make a real point of being in bed at 10, it's a routine. And if we have a night of not good sleep, then one night is good, as long as the next night we get it, nothing really, we don't really feel that. But a week ago, I had like 4 nights, I think, where I didn't sleep well. Because I actually sleep with my little one on the same bed. My wife sleeps in a different room, and this way we all get really good sleep.
Right, smart.
Yeah, and but he was waking me up a couple of times in the night, a few nights in a row, and I just started feeling exhausted, and I never feel like that. And
there you
very
go. That's
demotivated.
That was the inflammatory state that was created by sleep deprivation.
Right.
It is actually, you'll actually feel far worse. Like if you ate French fries at every meal for a week, you wouldn't feel like that. But you get 4 hours a night sleep for a week, you feel like you're going to die.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I with my patients, I do nutritional consultations, and I really just keep it to a basic, where I remove flour, sugar, and try to get people to eat less bread, pasta, rice, and then I go for twice a day vegetables. I'm an omnivore, so I try to encourage people, especially when we think of nutrient intake, to also eat meat, especially if there's some chronic fatigue situation going on. And the responses I see are, it just keeps amazing me.
It's stunning. It really is stunning.
And I'm not doing anything specific besides I work with a little bit of omega-3s, but that has a long-term effect, so not so immediate with most people. But vitamin D, I do with a lot of patients. I get them to measure vitamin D, and then we for a month we do a high doses every day, and then we measure after 5-6 weeks again. And I had a patient of about 30 years of age who the other day told me, she said, she came in and she sat down and she said, I just want to show you something. And she got her phone out and she showed me a little video clip, and it was, she was pregnant. And I said, oh, congratulations. And she's like, yeah, we've been trying for a very long time, but I think because of your help, I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh, it can't be the adjustments.
Right.
And it was the vitamin D, most likely, because she was very fatigued, and vitamin D was very low, and we worked a few months to get it up there, and then she became pregnant.
I will say that if there's one nutrient that would have that kind of, really impressive outcome, it is vitamin D, which is probably the global deficiency issue. Yeah. Although iron deficiency anemia, if you start to think about third world, is a big deal there and other places. But just globally, vitamin D deficiency is enormous. It's huge issue.
Because I can't exactly remember the numbers, but there are thousands of cell receptors on the ovaries for vitamin D. It's the eyes and the ovaries, if I remember correctly. And so if you're really low, then that might be a problem.
Well, actually, the vitamin D. So you get sunshine, or you take in the cholecalciferol. You get a pass through the liver, and you get your 25-OHD. And 25-OHD3 is what's measured, as you know, in the blood test. So 25, when I went through school, because I graduated chiropractic college in '86, and so when I learned vitamin D in undergrad and in chiropractic college, it was all about the vitamin D, the cholecalciferol goes to the liver, 25-OHD, and then that goes to the kidney. You get 125-dihydroxy, and then that influences intestinal absorption and bone health. And that's all we learned. So then, I don't forget, it was probably in the 90s, and they started to identify that you have that almost every key cell in the body is able to produce 125D in the cell itself. And that includes, eyes, ovaries, testicles. I mean, just wherever you go, the reproductive organs, pancreas, it makes no difference where you go. Immune cells, they all have the ability to produce the 125-dihydroxy. What that does inside the cell, it's involved with like 1,000 or 2,000 different gene regulation patterns. It's absolutely stunning. Yeah. And so you think about the COVID issue, right? They scared the crap out of people. What they should have said to people is, we've known, because we've known, in terms of the literature, since the Spanish flu of 1918, obese people were more likely to die. So they've known that for over 100 years. So when you hear that argument about, well, we weren't prepared for this pandemic. Well, the Japanese population was, because they're thin.
Yeah.
It's not just because they wear masks. They're thin and they're healthy. And so they have been prepared. The Swedes and all you Scandinavian countries where you got about 20% obesity, 80% of your population was prepared. In America, our population is perfect for horrific outcomes. So the obesity thing has been known for a very, very, very long time. So they should have been told, lose weight, eat vegetables, take vitamin D, take fish oil. That's what we should have been told back, in January of 2020. But alas, that has not taken place.
Exactly. And I remember in the beginning when people were actually told to stay inside. So in some countries, in the middle of the summer last year, they were told stay inside. So a family of ours, they are, well, mom and dad and 3 little ones, and they have a small apartment, and they had to stay inside. And it was where they are 30 plus degrees Celsius. So, and then you just think, okay, what a perfect recipe for someone of age not to get sun, to be inside, to be lonely, to be depressed, and if they get infected. And I actually had a patient who works for a government institution here in the Netherlands, the government institution that regulates and controls and advises with the pandemic. And I asked him, what about vitamin D? Why did the government not advise people to, have their vitamin D checked at the GP and then accordingly advised to take it? And he simply told me that he wasn't very happy with the question, and he just told me that no, vitamin D it's a fat soluble vitamin that builds up in your body, and people can overdose with it. And that's where we lost. That's where I kind of ended the conversation, because at the same time the government here says that 60% of the people are deficient, and that's with the 50 millimolar per liter lower level. Right. So if we would really test on, say, 125 or 150 upper level, I don't know how many percent, far more, would be deficient.
Yeah.
And so I just, I just thought, okay, right. That's the way that it is being looked at, I guess.
It's terrible. The people in charge should, I've heard the term and I like it, the powers that shouldn't be. Right, the powers that be, the powers that shouldn't be. Because look what they've done. Yeah. Stay indoors, no vitamin D. And of course, when you're indoors and stir crazy, what are you going to do? You're going to overeat. So the obesity problem in America and elsewhere has increased. So we've actually created a greater population of sick people with this whole lockdown thing. It's horrible.
Yes. I wish we had more time to speak about this, because I have so many.
We can another time if you want.
Yeah. Great. We spoke a little bit about vitamin D. Especially when it comes to general health. Do you know more about research on vitamin D and musculoskeletal health. I know I saw a paper where they were doing, well, looking at rats. I'm sure it was rats and not mice. And they saw that there was less or slower degeneration of the discs with rats where they were sufficient in vitamin D. Do you know about?
I didn't see that. I did not read that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it was a really good paper. You know, they described all the pathways and interesting.
Yeah, well, I would say this in terms of supplements. You know, if you wanted to stay really, really simple, and because most chiropractors they just don't think chemically, but we think we eat though. So the easiest way to do it would be what you recommend: avoid sugar, flour, refined oils, which is just the basic thing. And then you said omega-3s, vitamin D, and I would throw one more in there that's very inexpensive, and that's magnesium.
Yeah.
Those three nutrients have such a broad impact on physiology. It's stunning, actually. And adequate D3, and well, actually, if you become deficient in magnesium, vitamin D, and omega-3s, that trifecta will flame you up and just compound the flame created by obesity and sedentary living and lack of sleep.
Okay.
So if you can get a handle on those and take the magnesium, the D, and the 3, you're in great shape. Most people.
That was actually a question I had for you. What would your suggestion be in terms of basic supplementation?
Yeah, those 3, and then throw a multi in there if you want. But the multis are like the average person. They're not struggling because they don't have enough B1. The problem is lack because stress depletes magnesium.
Okay. And
stress also depletes vitamin C, and vitamin C actually has an anti-cortisol effect. It's really interesting. I didn't know this until this whole COVID thing started. When they looked at animals that produce vitamin C and their resting cortisol levels, when you stress them out, if they produce vitamin C, their cortisol goes up very, very mildly.
Okay. So
they did this with a sturgeon, which is a vitamin C producer, and I think a trout that's not a vitamin C producer. Yeah. And the trout had far more stress compared to the vitamin C producer. So I've amended. Yeah. So this is so simple. Vitamin C, about 3,000 milligrams per day, it appears. Magnesium, 400 to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium. Vitamin D, depending upon where the deficiency is, about 5,000 IUs is a pretty good number for average.
Right.
And omega-3 is a couple of grams per day. You don't need to have a degree in biochemistry and nutrition to be comfortable with those 4 things, as well as stop overeating and move. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you'll have you have a population of patients who will just feel great.
Yeah.
And they'll never go away. You'll have helped them. And they'll come back when they have aches and pains. And you got this great practice now, as opposed to these walking, wounded, depressed, obese, miserable people who are just lost.
Well said. Glutathione. Do you sometimes use a precursor of a supplement for that with certain patients, or?
Well, interestingly, glutathione, the NRF2 enzyme, the system that creates glutathione, is stimulated by anti-inflammatory botanicals, for example.
Okay.
It's activated by lipoic acid. So for me, if I was going to take a substance to improve glutathione, it would probably be lipoic acid. It's cheap, yeah, and it has diverse effects. It drives ATP synthesis as well. Okay. I'd also be a CoQ10 guy, because as we age, our CoQ10 production kind of drops off.
Yeah.
But that now we're adding on there, so we can. I mean, I would add either CoQ10 or lipoic acid, and then as long as you're spicing with your meals, you'll have enough drive to get glutathione. But if you take glutathione in orally, it gets broken down. It may not be rebuilt.
And lysine or L-glutamine.
Yeah, glutamine. Oh yeah, those are all fine. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. The precursor for glutathione is cysteine, glycine, and glutamic acid.
Okay. And
most people get enough of that in their diet if they're eating animal proteins, fish, chicken, eggs, etc.
Yeah.
So to me, that really isn't the issue of the glutathione, and glutathione gets recycled also, and it gets recycled or it's recycling from the oxidized to the reduced state is supported by and driven by lipoic acid and CoQ10.
Okay.
So I like big global supportive supplements that have multiple effects. Yeah. So CoQ10, you can either do CoQ10 or lipoic acid, as far as I can tell.
Okay, great. That's a very good insight. Yeah, sometimes just listening to I've just feel like the message is so simple,
Oh, it's so simple.
and but you gotta, of course, as a clinician, a chiropractor, or somebody who works with patients, you got to be able to bring that across so people get the message. And it doesn't only help if I know how important it is. The people you work with need to understand and need to know, and of course, then they can make an informed choice. But I feel like sometimes I've had once I had a guy coming in and his wife was sitting next to him, and I did the report of findings, and I was telling him, because I knew he was, from his history, he was really eating terrible. He was always on the road and then stopping and eating at snack bars, and in the Netherlands that's just awful. And I said, look, you're not going to get better if we don't change your diet. And his wife was getting so upset with me. Like,
Wow.
he
Yeah.
came here to see you for his back, and why does he have to eat different? And I think maybe she thought I was attacking her, the food that she makes.
Yeah. The problem is that since food, so if you think about, whatever food it is, like if I think about a food that I really like a lot, like if I could just go do a pizza or Whoppers from Burger King, I'd still like those things. I don't eat it very much, and I eat pizza once in a while, but that's what I would like. So why? Because it tastes good, right?
Yeah.
Something that tastes good, it becomes a limbic system event. It becomes emotional, right? Becomes emotional. So if we were hunkered down in a military situation somewhere, we'd be dodging bullets. We wouldn't care what we were eating,
Yep.
right? So if you're dodging bullets and all you had was fantastic fish and vegetables, it would be like amazing, right? You wouldn't care because you had other concerns.
Yeah.
Not getting killed. The average person living in the modern day, they care about endlessly satisfying their palate because their lives, in many ways, are just stressed out so much they just get the enjoyment of this pleasure food.
Yeah.
And so it really becomes an issue of like how you broach the topic with people. And I think the best way is, again, to just talk about, obesity, overweight equals heart disease, and heart disease. I mean, there are papers that actually say, is osteoarthritis heart disease of the joints? I'm paraphrasing, but there are papers out there like that. Tendinopathy is diabetes of tendons. Right? Disc herniation is far more common in hyperglycemic people than in normal glycemic people, unless you got the bad genes for it, which is a lot of people don't realize that, when anyone comes in and they got radiating pain and they're young, you should automatically ask about family history very carefully, because you'll typically find relative, either a mother, father, or uncles and aunts or grandparents that have disc herniation also, which means that they're a genetic disc herniator.
Yeah.
And that's been studied years ago. There's a bunch of different genes, tryptophan genes, what are the other genes that are collagen genes, a couple other genes that are
often they'll just tell you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Some don't ask though, but that's you need to find. So if that you find, now you got someone who is disposed to it, which means you have to change that patient's loading style. So if they're if they work in a shipping place where they're lug and load around, they got to change the job because they are just genetically disposed to herniate. But the average person is not, and it's the lifestyle that induces the herniation.
Yeah. Well said. That's good to know. Great. Yeah, no, awesome. But yeah, I'm trying to think of something broader than the basic.
Oh, just real quick. One of the things that you said before is like what I described, and what you do is just so simple. It's not complicated. Now, this is one of the biggest pushbacks I get. People will say, "It can't be that simple." I'm like, "What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Of course it's that simple." Like, what are you kidding me? Like, how do I get my biceps stronger? Well, you take a weight and you do curls. It can't be that simple. It is that simple.
Yeah.
Do a lot of curls and your biceps will get bigger. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
So I think the reason why a lot of DCs and PTs resist this is because it's so simple. It's almost like, well, it can't be that. I mean, I don't want to do this thing, so therefore I'm going to reject the fact that it's simple and make it more complicated in my own mind. Say, well, I'm a structural person. I'm a mechanical person. Yeah. So Mackenzie's a pretty popular I mean, I went through parts A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
And so people would kind of, because they know that I'm a nutrition guy, they would say, well, what do you think, Dave? And I say, well, just when you bend backwards, just think about broccoli. Think backwards, or whatever your directional preference is, which is mostly extension, right?
Yeah.
Think broccoli. Think fish while you're doing it. Don't think French fries. Think broccoli. Yeah. Make it easy. Don't make it complicated.
Great. No, actually, what you're saying is a lot of people should consider just implementing it in their approach with patients. And
I got a great story for you. Do you want to hear this one?
Please go for it.
Okay, so when I was teaching at Palmer, Florida, a decade or so ago, I taught a Graston elective, and I did other soft tissue stuff and showed them end range loading. And this one he was American, but I think pure Scot, this big strong guy, like the Highlander Games kind of guy. I mean, this guy was just big. And so he's had thoracolumbar junction pain since he's like 15. He's like 25 now. I go, since you're 15. And he's been in chiro school at that point for like 2.5 years. Anything help? He goes, nothing has helped. And so I asked him, like, well, because I tried some ginger and turmeric and on, and that didn't do anything. So getting back to when we first started, I said, well, do you ever take, anti-inflammatory drugs, Advil, ibuprofen, whatever? He goes, no, not very often. I go, have you ever taken it for your pain? He goes, yeah. I go, well, what happens? He goes, the pain goes away for 3 days completely when I take Advil. 3 days. So everyone listen to this? There's like 25 in the class. 3 totally pain-free, and he has the pain since he's 5 for the last 10 years. So my next question was, when was the last time you ate a vegetable? Not complicated question. And he goes, this is his answer. He goes, I don't remember. And I said, well, when was the last time you had fruit? I don't remember. I'm like, okay, well, what do you eat? He goes, well, so he's like a typical guy. So, well, I eat the rice and chicken, or rice and tuna. Maybe he had eggs and rice. So I'm like, so here's what you got to do. The additional vegetable calories will be meaningless, but assuming that you're eating a lot of rice, get rid of like 80% of the rice and do sweet potatoes and vegetables and have fruits for snack. So this was on Tuesday of week 1. It was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, week 1, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, week 2. So we find this out Tuesday night.
Yeah. So
he starts it, and we didn't talk about it the next class or the next day and the next week. So it was a week later. I said, so any difference? He goes, 50% better. I'm like, that's pretty good. He goes, it could be placebo. I'm like, it certainly could. It certainly could. So, well, I said, well, are you gonna keep doing this? And he goes, absolutely. So I didn't see him. He was in the clinic. I didn't see him for like 3 months. So I asked him, like, hey, how's the back pain? He goes, doc, it was gone like 3 or 4 days after the last elective, and it's been gone ever since. So here's a student in chiropractic college who is almost done with school. Yeah. Right. And I'm not sure if he had me for nutrition. Maybe I wasn't. I forget if I even had it. If I had him at that point, it was so long ago. But it just wasn't in the head because there's this disconnect. But it was that simple. Now here's a guy who was like 25, going to be a chiropractor in chronic pain. Every treatment that he was given did nothing for him. Nothing. Now that's an outlier example, but I've seen many of those people. Yeah. Young people who are physically fit and strong and athletic and live in chronic pain, and in 2 weeks he was pain-free.
Yep. Wow, great story.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
For me, at least what I see with a lot of my colleagues over here is, I tell them about my nutritional consultation, and they kind of look at me a little bit strange, like, okay, tell me more about that. What do you do? I'm like, yeah, I have a little form they fill in, getting an idea of what their diet looks like, and have a couple of questions about what they feel like and whether they wake up early and fatigue and so on. And like, okay, and so what do you tell them to eat? And I'm like, yeah, I move them off the refined stuff and I get them onto a lot, at least twice a day, vegetables, especially if I think that there's a good reason for that. And I want to make sure they don't eat processed meat and good meat. And if there's any problems with especially wheat and dairy, then we'd look at that. but I keep it very basic and very simple. And I can see they're kind of thinking, well, no, I can't do that. And I think for a lot of them, it is because they don't necessarily feel that they eat well enough themselves.
Yeah.
Because they know me, at least a lot of my chiro friends and people that I know, they know that I eat very strict. But I've been busy with it for more than 10 years. And I think that's where it comes in. People just, I think a lot of chiros don't necessarily believe it themselves. And so I think that's why they don't really want to bring the message across.
Yeah, I'd say that is the failing of chiropracticologists. Think about your first year of chiropractic college. It was all basic sciences,
Yeah.
right? All basic sciences. And those basic sciences, you learn a lot of pathways. You learn glycolysis and Krebs cycle, electron transport. You learn some inflammation stuff. And that's all discussed like in a vacuum, as opposed to in, for example, so for you, you've been eating well for 10 years. You recommend it to your patients, and then in 4 days, you feel like you're a sick old man because you didn't sleep well.
Yeah.
That shows you the power of not sleeping, despite the fact that you already do eat healthy.
Yeah.
So it's a great failing in our healthcare education, where they don't talk about how lack of sleep, lack of exercise, chronic stress, which you can avoid. Like you can't avoid all the stressors, right? You can't, but you should be able to not choose stressors that was your choice. Like the whole COVID thing was not our choice.
Yeah.
Right. But I could have bought 6 more cars and during COVID just because I want cars, and now I'm in debt. Now I get that stressor. So that would be a stressor that I take on because I would be an idiot to do that, right?
Yeah.
So we should live within our means, because that's where most stress comes from, financial stuff. Choose relationships properly. Get adequate sleep. If you have a kid like yours, when it's going like that, well, then maybe switch out with your wife and she can sleep with the little one. You can get a good night's sleep. And so you work it out and take naps. I mean, you can work it out. So the fact that people find that to be difficult is again, it's a failing of the first 1 year of chiro school, med school, PT school.
Yeah.
Because they learn basic sciences, and what they learn is they learn to dislike the basic sciences because they are annoying. And they're typically not discussed in a clinical context. So you have this rejection of basic science in the brain. I'm finally free, I can be a clinician. Now, why should I eat better?
Yeah.
Remember those courses that you were taught poorly and you didn't like and you hate them and you have an aversion to them now? That's why.
Yeah.
So you get this recoil, like you said, look, there's Bigfoot. No, go eat some vegetables. It's not that complicated.
Great. I think we'll end there.
Okay.
And I'd love to speak to you again, maybe about Corona, and
yeah, sure,
if that's okay. So
yeah, absolutely, whenever you want.
Great. We'll make an appointment for that.
Okay.
I appreciate it, Dr. Seaman. It's been absolutely great, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully you can travel again and do your thing like before after this Corona madness.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, Dr. Stein. Appreciate it.
Great. Have a good day.
You too.